there are still places on this planet where human footsteps have rarely touched. Places where roads fade away, where signals disappear, where time no longer follows the rhythms we expect. In these regions, nature moves more slowly, and sometimes not at all. Abandoned villages sink back into vines. Shipwrecks rest where oceans and deserts collide. Forests grow in ways that defy classification. And deep beneath the surface, entire worlds remain hidden from light. These places are not myths. They are real. Mapped, photographed, and yet not fully understood. Modern science explains much of what we see: erosion, climate, human history, geology. But in some locations, the explanations stop short. Data is missing. Instruments fail. Access is restricted. And questions remain open. Tonight, we will not chase answers too quickly. Instead, we will travel slowly through Earth's quietest and most enigmatic places. Not to prove the extraordinary, but to understand why mystery still survives. In a world that believes it has measured everything. At the edges of the continents, where maps grow sparse, and roads quietly disappear, the earth begins to feel different. Here, the land no longer welcomes permanence. Human structures struggle to survive. And even the most advanced systems of navigation are forced to admit their limits. One such place lies along the northwestern coast of Namibia, where a vast desert meets a cold, unyielding ocean. This region is known as the Skeleton Coast. From the air, it appears empty. Pale sand stretching endlessly toward the horizon. A gray-blue ocean pressing inward. And a constant veil of fog drifting silently across the shoreline. But on the ground, the coast tells a darker story. For centuries, ships approaching this stretch of Africa have vanished without warning. Not because of storms, but because of silence. Cold ocean currents collide with hot desert air, creating thick fog that erases the horizon. Navigation becomes uncertain. Depth perception fails. And strong offshore currents pull vessels toward land before crews realize what is happening. By the time danger becomes visible, escape is often impossible. Rusting shipwrecks now lie scattered along the shore, their broken hulls half buried in sand, as if abandoned mid-journey. Some are decades old. Others date back more than a century. Each one tells the same quiet lesson. Technology is not immunity. In 1942, during the height of the Second World War, a British cargo ship ran aground along this coast, with no immediate rescue possible. The crew made a desperate decision. They would attempt to cross the desert on foot. Miles of dry terrain stretched inland. No reliable water sources. No shelter from the sun. Most did not survive. Their journey ended not in dramatic catastrophe, but in exhaustion. Nearby, the remains of whales and seals dot the coastline. Some were stranded by tides. Others died naturally, their bones preserved by the dry air and salt. The result is a landscape that feels frozen in time, where death does not disappear quickly, but lingers. This is not a place of legends or curses. It is a place where environmental systems intersect in ways that are unforgiving to human presence. And yet, even with modern satellites, advanced forecasting, and global positioning systems, the Skeleton Coast remains unpredictable. Ships still avoid it, not out of superstition, but respect. Further along the world's margins, similar patterns appear. Coastlines that resist settlement. Islands that empty faster than they fill. Territories that demand retreat rather than control. In these places, human absence is not a failure. It is a response. A quiet acknowledgement that not all landscapes are meant to be mastered. Along abandoned shores, wrecks remain where they fell. Not salvaged, not restored. Left instead as markers of where progress paused. Standing among them, one begins to sense a recurring theme. These are not anomalies to be solved. They are boundaries to be recognized. And the farther we travel from cities and infrastructure, the more frequently those boundaries appear. Edges of land. Edges of understanding. The Skeleton Coast does not hide its danger. It simply does not accommodate us. And perhaps that is why it feels so unsettling. Because it reminds us that even in a mapped and measured world, there are still places where human presence is temporary, where history is written in corrosion, and where nature quietly waits, long after we have gone. As we leave this coast behind, the question remains: how many other places exist like this? Not unknown, but unresolved. Places where the earth does not reveal everything at once, and where silence itself becomes part of the story. Not all quiet places were abandoned in ancient times. Some were left behind, within living memory. Places where the walls still stand, The doors still hang on their hinges, and the silence feels unfinished. On the eastern coast of China, hidden among steep hills and dense forest, lies the village of Haotuan. In the 1980s, hundreds of fishing families lived here. Children walked narrow stone paths to school. Boats came and went with the tides. Smoke rose from kitchens in the evening air. And then, within a single generation, everyone left. There was no war, no natural disaster. The reasons were gradual: limited access to education, poor medical services, unreliable transportation to the mainland. Life became difficult. Opportunity drifted elsewhere. Families left one by one, until the village crossed a threshold. From inhabited to forgotten. Nature did not wait. Vines crept over stairways. Moss spread across rooftops. Walls cracked as roots pushed inward. Within just a few years, houses disappeared beneath green layers of growth. What makes Haotuan unusual is not that it was abandoned, but how completely nature reclaimed it. No full structural assessment has ever been completed. No long-term geological study has documented how quickly the decay occurred, or how stable the remaining buildings truly are. Access today is limited. Visitors are allowed only during certain hours, and only along designated paths. The village exists in a narrow window of time, no longer functional, but not yet erased. And it raises an uncomfortable question. How many places like this exist? Modern locations that slipped quietly out of use, without leaving clear records of why, or how fast the transition happened. Across the world, similar sites appear. Coastal towns emptied by shifting economies. Mountain settlements abandoned after transport routes changed. Communities dissolved not by catastrophe, but by slow logistical failure. These are not ruins in the classical sense. They are pauses. Frozen moments where infrastructure remains, but purpose does not. And because they are recent, they are often overlooked. Archaeology focuses on ancient civilizations. Urban studies focus on growing cities. But places in between, neither old enough for legend, nor active enough for investment, often fall outside systematic study. In many cases, no comprehensive reports exist, documenting their final years. No baseline measurements. No environmental tracking. No sociological follow-up. Just absence. And absence, when left unexplored, becomes another kind of mystery. Walking through such villages, the silence feels different. From ancient ruins, there are no millennia between you and the last resident. Sometimes only a few decades. Personal objects remain. Furniture. Signs of routine. The sense is not of history, but interruption. As if life paused mid-sentence. These places challenge the idea that mystery belongs only to the distant past. Sometimes, the unknown exists, not because something is ancient, but because it was left too recently for distance to soften its edges. Houtuan stands as a reminder that modern civilization, despite all its systems and records, can still vanish quietly. And when it does, the land resumes its work. Patient, methodical, unconcerned, leaving behind places that are not forgotten, but no longer fully understood. As we move onward, away from abandonment and toward repetition, the next landscapes will present a different kind of question. Not about why people left, but why the land itself looks the way it does. As we move away from places shaped by abandonment, the landscape begins to present a different kind of puzzle. Not absence, but repetition. In the heart of the central Philippines, far from major cities and industrial corridors, more than 1,000 hills rise from the earth. They are known as the Chocolate Hills. From a distance, they appear almost artificial. Each hill follows nearly the same proportions. Rounded peaks, smooth slopes, uniform spacing, spread across roughly 20 square miles. The terrain feels less like random geology and more like a pattern carefully repeated. Yet these hills are entirely natural. Core samples taken from several locations confirm that the underlying rock was once a coral-rich seabed. Long ago, this region lay beneath a shallow ocean. As tectonic forces lifted the land, water retreated, and erosion began its slow work. But erosion alone rarely creates uniformity. Normally, wind and rain carve landscapes unevenly. They favor weaknesses. They exaggerate differences. Here, the opposite occurred. Hundreds of hills formed with nearly identical angles and near identical heights. No single geological model has fully explained how this happened. During the dry season, another transformation occurs. The grass covering the hills turns from green to deep brown, almost simultaneously. Within days, The entire region shifts color. The change is so consistent that it appears synchronized. Biology offers partial explanations. Grass species, seasonal moisture loss, temperature thresholds, but no detailed biological study has been able to predict the exact timing or confirm why variation between hills is so limited. Beneath the surface, the uncertainty deepens. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected cavities beneath several hills. Their size and distribution remain only partially mapped. Some appear isolated. Others may connect. What role these voids play in shaping the surface landscape is still unknown. Strict regulations limit construction and restrict movement to predefined paths. The hills are preserved, but also protected from extensive intrusive study. As a result, much of what lies below remains inferred rather than observed. Standing among the chocolate hills, the sensation is subtle but persistent. Not confusion, but imbalance. The land appears calm, stable, unchanging, and yet it resists complete explanation. Patterns without clear cause have a way of unsettling us. They suggest order without revealing intention. The human mind is drawn to symmetry, to repetition, to structure. When nature displays these traits without offering a clear mechanism, questions arise, not about meaning, but about process. Are there forces at work that we do not yet fully model? Are slow systems interacting in ways we have not observed long enough? Or are these simply outcomes of time scales beyond human patience? The chocolate hills do not demand answers. They endure. Year after year, their form remains unchanged. Grass grows. Grass fades. Rain returns. The pattern holds. And in that persistence, they remind us of something essential. That even when landscapes are visible, measurable, and protected, understanding can still remain incomplete. As we leave these repeating forms behind, the next places will confront us, not with shape, but with behavior. Water that does not act as expected. Lakes that change without warning. And systems that remind us that the earth is not static, even when it appears calm. Water is often described as predictable. It flows downhill. It fills available space. It follows gravity, temperature, and pressure. And yet, In certain places on Earth, water behaves in ways that quietly resist expectation. High in the mountains of southeastern Kazakhstan, there is a lake that should not look the way it does. Lake Kandy was formed in 1911 after a powerful earthquake triggered a massive landslide. The collapse blocked a natural valley, allowing rainwater and snowmelt to collect. What emerged was a narrow, alpine lake, cold, still, and unusually clear. But beneath its surface, a forest stands upright. Dozens of pine trees, submerged for more than a century, remain intact. Their trunks rise straight from the lake bed, their upper branches breaking the surface, like the masts of sunken ships. In most freshwater environments, wood decays quickly. Microorganisms break it down. Oxygen reacts with exposed tissue. Time erases structure. Here, the water temperature remains consistently low. Mineral composition slows biological activity, and decay nearly stops. The trees remain preserved, not fossilized, but suspended. From above, the lake appears calm. From below, it reveals a frozen moment in time. Scientists continue to study Kandy, yet many questions remain. Why has decomposition progressed so slowly? What exact chemical balance maintains this state? And how stable is the system over longer periods? Seasonal sunlight introduces another layer of uncertainty. At certain times of year, light refracts through the clear water, creating unusual color shifts along the submerged trunks. No consistent pattern has been established. Far to the south, on the volcanic island of Flores in Indonesia, 3 crater lakes sit side by side. At the summit of Mount Kelimutu, they are close enough to walk between in minutes. And yet, they behave as if disconnected. Their colors shift unpredictably. Blue, green, red, sometimes darkening to near black. What makes this phenomenon unusual is not that the colors change, but that they do so independently. One lake may shift while the others remain unchanged. Another may change months later. No fixed cycle has been identified. Researchers believe mineral oxidation and volcanic gas activity play a role. Sensors placed on the lake beds have recorded irregular temperature and pressure fluctuations, but the data has never been sufficient to predict when or how a color change will occur. In 2013, a focused study attempted to model the system. It failed. Since 2015, Sections of the crater rims have been closed. Sudden fissures and landslides posed risks to both visitors and research teams. Access is now limited. Instrumentation remains sparse. As with many remote systems, the lake's behavior is observed more than measured. These waters remind us that visibility does not equal control. Across the planet, other bodies of water share similar traits. Caves where rivers disappear. Lakes that maintain impossible clarity. Pools that resist biological growth. In each case, water becomes a medium not just of light, but of uncertainty. We rely on water as a constant. It shapes civilizations, determines climate, defines habitability. And yet, in these places, it refuses to behave as expected. Standing at the edge of such lakes, one senses a quiet tension. Not danger, but instability. A reminder that even the most familiar substance on Earth can still defy complete understanding. And that beneath calm surfaces, complex systems operate beyond immediate perception. As we move forward, the next environments will take us deeper, away from open air and visible light, into places where water, stone, and biology intersect in darkness, where pressure rises, maps grow incomplete, and the earth begins to close in around us. Beneath the surface of the earth, the rules begin to change. Light fades quickly. Sound behaves differently. Pressure increases. And with every step downward, our ability to observe becomes more limited. In central Vietnam, hidden beneath dense jungle and limestone mountains, lies one of the largest cave systems ever discovered. It is known as Sun Dong. From above, nothing suggests what exists below. No open chasm. No obvious entrance. Only forest. The cave was discovered not by instruments, but by accident. A local man following wind and water into darkness. Inside, the scale becomes difficult to comprehend. Passageways wide enough to hold city blocks. Ceilings that vanish into shadow. Rivers flowing silently through stone. In some chambers, collapsed ceilings allow sunlight to enter. Over time, this light has given rise to a self-contained ecosystem. A jungle grows underground. Plants reach upward toward narrow shafts of stone. Mist hangs on the air. Weather forms within the cave itself. Rain falls, but never touches the outside wall. Scientists believe this ecosystem partially understood. Water flow, mineral nutrients, and biological interactions remain difficult to model without long-term monitoring. But access is limited. Air pressure changes rapidly. Humidity disrupts electronic equipment, and certain sections remain too unstable to enter safely. In 2019, a deep exploration team identified a submerged tunnel leading beyond the known cave system. The dive was halted. Sensors recorded a sudden pressure spike. Signal transmission failed. The tunnel remains unexplored, far beneath the deserts of New Mexico. Another cave system tells a different story. Lechuguilla Cave stretches more than 150 miles, descending nearly 1.600 feet underground. Unlike Sun Dong, this cave was not shaped by surface water. It formed through deep chemical processes. Sulfuric acid rising from below, dissolving limestone from the inside. The result is a labyrinth, filled with formations found nowhere else on Earth. Gypsum chandeliers, delicate sulfur crystals, thin mineral sheets suspended like fabric. But beauty here is paired with risk. Air composition shifts unpredictably. Some chambers contain toxic gases. Others exhibit rapid oxygen loss. In the early 1990s, an expedition was aborted after researchers experienced skin reactions caused by microbial films coating the walls. These microorganisms show high resistance to antibiotics, despite being isolated from the surface biosphere. They exhibit survival traits that challenge existing biological models. Because of these risks, large sections of the cave remain sealed. No complete map exists. And unlike surface environments, changes underground happen slowly, often invisibly. Pressure gradients shift. Mineral growth continues. Microbial colonies expand, all without witnesses. What unites these subterranean worlds is not mystery for its own sake. It is limitation. Our tools struggle in darkness. Our bodies struggle under pressure. And our data becomes fragmented. We measure what we can, then extrapolate the rest. But extrapolation has its limits. Below the surface, the Earth operates on timescales and conditions that resist constant observation. These places are not hidden intentionally. They are simply difficult. And difficulty itself becomes a barrier to knowledge. As we emerge from the depths, the pattern becomes clear. Some environments remain incomplete, not because answers are forbidden, but because reaching them comes at a cost we are not always willing to pay. And beyond these caves, other regions exist, where science does not descend, but instead stops at the surface, not due to darkness or pressure, but choice. There are places on Earth where science does not fail, but pauses. Not because the questions are too difficult, and not because the tools do not exist, but because observation itself comes into conflict with responsibility. One such place lies far from the mainland, isolated in the Indian Ocean. Socotra, often called the most alien-looking island on Earth. Socotra is home to plants and animals found nowhere else. Nearly 40% of its species exist only here. Trees that bleed red sap, plants shaped like inverted umbrellas, ecosystems that appear detached from the evolutionary paths of surrounding regions. For decades, scientific teams attempted to study the island in detail. But in the 1990s, research access changed. After foreign teams were discovered, removing biological samples without publishing results, restrictions were imposed. Permits became rare. Survey zones were limited. Entire regions were declared off-limits. Today, large sections of Socotra remain unmapped. Deep limestone caves have never been fully explored. Highland plateaus are only partially documented. After a major cyclone in 2018, a remote upland area revealed stone-like formations resembling foundations. Before surveys could begin, all activity was halted under environmental protection orders. No conclusions were published. Socotra exists in a state of balance, preserved, but partially unknown. A different kind of boundary appears in the Amazon rainforest. From above, it looks continuous, green without interruption. But beneath the canopy, the picture fragments. Since 2009, satellite imagery has revealed geometric earthworks hidden by vegetation, lines, circles, grids. More than 60 large-scale ancient settlements have been identified. None have been fully excavated. Environmental regulations limit ground access. Preservation laws restrict equipment. Long-term installations are prohibited. In some regions, ground-penetrating radar has experienced electromagnetic interference. Data returns incomplete. Signals distort. Whether the cause lies in soil composition, buried materials, or sensor limitations remains unclear. What is clear is that the Amazon holds more information than current systems are allowed to extract. Science observes from the edges. In places like these, the challenge is no longer technical. It is ethical. How much disturbance is acceptable in the pursuit of knowledge? When does understanding become interference? Preservation requires restraint, but restraint comes with a cost. Without continuous monitoring, systems change unnoticed. Species evolve without record. Geological shifts occur unmeasured. The data gap widens. These are not failures of curiosity. They are decisions. Choices made collectively to prioritize longevity over certainty. And yet, these choices leave questions unresolved, not unanswered, but suspended. Socotra and the Amazon are not isolated cases. Across the world, protected zones grow larger. Access becomes conditional. Data collection becomes intermittent. Science adapts by modeling, by simulating, by inferring. But inference is not observation. And without observation, confidence weakens. These places remind us that knowledge is not unlimited. Not because the earth hides itself, but because we choose not to look too closely. As we continue, the next landscapes will bring us back to human construction. Structures carved, assembled, and aligned with extraordinary precision. Places where science is allowed to observe, but still struggles to explain. When science is allowed to observe, to measure, and to document, it does not always arrive at clarity. Some of the most enduring human structures on Earth stand fully visible, carefully preserved, and extensively studied. And yet, their construction remains only partially understood. In west-central India, carved deep into a basalt cliff face, lies a complex of rock-cut sanctuaries, known as the Ellora Caves. From a distance, the site appears quiet, but once inside, scale and precision reveal themselves. Dozens of chambers line the cliff, each carved directly from solid rock. Among them stands a structure that challenges conventional construction logic. The Kailasa Temple. It was carved from the top down, not assembled, not stacked, but excavated. An entire freestanding temple, released from the surrounding stone. Archaeologists estimate that millions of tons of basalt were removed to create it. And yet, no construction blueprints exist. No records of planning. No documentation of labor organization. No explanation of debris removal logistics. Only the finished form remains. Tools available at the time were simple by modern standards. Iron was limited. Machinery non-existent. Still, the symmetry holds. The alignment remains precise. Carvings retain clarity. After more than 1,000 years. Inside the caves, symbolic reliefs cover walls and pillars. Many have been identified. Many have not. Without comparable references, interpretation stalls. Some chambers remain restricted, not because they are unknown, but because preservation demands distance. The structure stands complete, yet its story remains fragmented. Far from India, in a narrow valley of the Caucasus Mountains, another site presents a different puzzle. Dargavs, often called the City of the Dead. It consists of more than 90 stone tombs, clustered along a rocky slope. Each tomb was built to house entire families. Inside, bodies were sealed away, protected from scavengers and decay. What unsettles researchers is not the tombs themselves, but what was placed within them. Many remains were laid to rest inside wooden boats. Yet there are no rivers here, no lakes, no evidence of nearby water routes. Why boats? No written records survive. No formal excavation has mapped the interiors in detail. Structural instability has kept entrances sealed. As a result, much of what lies inside is inferred from surface observation alone. Some tombs face different directions. Others vary subtly in design. Were these differences symbolic, social, chronological? Without documentation, answers remain speculative. What unites Ellora and Dargavs is not mystery born of secrecy. It is absence of instruction. The builders left no manuals, no explanations, no justification for their choices. They assumed understanding would persist, but understanding did not. Centuries passed. Languages changed. Cultures shifted. And what was once self-evident became opaque. Modern archaeology excels at material analysis. Stone can be dated. Tool marks examined. Stress patterns modeled. But intention does not fossilize. Meaning erodes faster than structure. These sites demonstrate a quiet truth. human capability has often exceeded its own record-keeping. Complex systems were built without leaving behind the logic that shaped them. And when that logic disappears, precision becomes puzzle. Standing before such structures, one does not feel doubt about human ingenuity. One feels respect, paired with uncertainty. Not everything built was meant to explain itself to the future. Some knowledge was contextual, and once context vanished, interpretation followed. As we move forward, the next places will take us beyond stone and architecture, into regions where instruments themselves struggle to function, where signals fade, measurements distort, and even presence becomes difficult to confirm. Not all mysteries are built from stone. Some emerge only when we attempt to measure. In many remote regions of the world, the Earth does not resist exploration through force, but through interference. Signals weaken, data distorts, instruments behave unpredictably. Along certain coastlines, sonar mapping produces incomplete returns. Echoes stretch longer than expected. Depth readings shift between surveys. The equipment functions properly, yet the data does not stabilize. In parts of southern New Zealand's Fiordland, narrow fjords seismic activity. Without consistent access, the signals remain cataloged, but unexplained. And so, the data remains suspended. These fading signals are not evidence of hidden forces. They are reminders of constraint. Our tools are designed for stability. The Earth is not. Natural systems fluctuate constantly, often outside the narrow tolerances of our instruments. When conditions fall outside calibration ranges, information degrades. And with degradation, certainty fades. In many cases, the mystery is not what exists, but what cannot be measured long enough to be understood. The Earth does not announce these limits. It reveals them quietly, through static, through gaps. Accepted as unfinished. As this journey comes to rest, what remains is not a single answer, not a revelation, not a conclusion, but a pattern. Across deserts, forests, oceans, and stone, we have encountered places that resist full explanation, not because they are supernatural, not because knowledge is forbidden, but because the Earth is vast, and human observation is brief. Some regions remain untouched, because access is difficult. Others remain incomplete, because preservation demands restraint. And some remain unresolved, simply because time has not yet allowed all questions to be asked. These places remind us that mystery does not require myth. It exists naturally, at the edges of data, at the limits of measurement, and in environments where systems overlap in complex ways. Water behaves unexpectedly. Stone holds forgotten intentions. Signals fade before patterns stabilize. None of this diminishes human understanding. Instead, it places it in context. Civilizations have always explored what lay beyond the horizon, and each generation believed it stood close to completeness. Yet every map expands. Every discovery reveals new gaps. The unknown is not a failure of science. It is its companion. Tonight's story does not ask you to believe in hidden forces or unseen intelligences. It asks only for patience, for the quiet acceptance that some truths emerge slowly over decades, centuries, or longer, and that some landscapes may never fully reveal themselves within a single lifetime. As the world grows quieter and attention softens, it is enough to know this: the earth does not rush. It keeps its rhythms, its cycles, its silences. And within those silences, there is space, not for fear, but for wonder. Rest now. The questions will remain, and the earth, as always, will be waiting.